Hello everyone. Welcome to the Amazon QuickSight Learning Series. This is a weekly webinar presented to you by our solutions architect and product managers where you will learn about some new product functionalities, best practices, and user tips on improving your experience as a developer, reader, or an author of Amazon QuickSight. In this installment, we will talk about what's new with tables and pivot table visuals, and this is presented by our Senior Product Manager of Charting, Bhupinder Chadda. Before Bhupinder starts his presentation, I would quickly walk you through about the Amazon QuickSight community. Most of you are already a part of it. If not, please sign up for that with the information I'll be sharing in the next slide. The QuickSight community is a one-stop shop to all of your BI journey and learning needs. You can ask questions to experts, learn using how-to videos, see what's new and blog post announcements, as well as sign up for our events, which we have every week. Take a quick moment to scan this QR code and sign up for the community if you have not already. Giving you a brief overview of the events which we have lined up for you. So the Amazon QuickSight Learning Series happens every week, once in America's time on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Pacific time, and once in European time zone on Thursdays 10 a.m. Central European time. Other than that, every first Friday we have a session on new features. Second and third Wednesdays, we have immersion days in Americas. These are immersive hands-on workshop, very useful for people who want to get into an authoring or a developing mode. Third Wednesdays, the immersion days happens in Europe. And finally, fourth Thursdays of the month, we have live Q&A in America's time. Community is also the place where we will be taking the Q&A. For this session, we will use a tag, which is QLS-table-visual that will help us identify questions specific to this session and prioritize answering them. In a brief moment, I will show you how to ask question on the community using this tag. Finally, a common question which we get is on the recording. Yes, this session is being recorded and the recording will be shared on our Amazon QuickSight community as well as our YouTube channel. Now let's see what the community looks like and how to ask a question. Once you land on the Amazon QuickSight community using the URL community.amazonquicksite.com, you can navigate through the question answer sections either using the question and answer tile at the bottom of the page or by going on the categories menu and clicking question and answer. Once you are on the question and answer page, go to new question, and when you click that, you should get a field that should pop up for you to ask the question. Type in your question here, select the tag, which is QLS table visual, and give a description for what you want to ask. Once you click new question, the question will be posted for our experts to answer it. Now I'll hand it over to Bhupi to walk us through what's new with tables and pivot table visuals.
Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Bhupinder Singh, and today we'll be looking at some of our recent launches for tables and pivot tables. So to begin with, we recently launched increased field limits for pivot tables. So initially we had about 20 as a limit for rows, columns, and values. Now that limit has increased to about 40. So you can have up to 40 values and 40 as a combined limit for rows and columns. Now, what I mean by a combined limit is, let's say you have about 30 fields in your rows, then you can have up to about 10 fields in your columns. The combined limit for both will be about 40. Now that we encourage you to add more fields to your pivot tables, right? But there are obviously use cases where you have legacy tools and you're trying to migrate over QuickSight and you have really gigantic tables, or cases where you're trying to visualize these values in your row setting, right? For looking at more like business review metrics in a different structure, that is where the increased limits will come in really handy. Next, we just last week actually we launched about hierarchy layout. Now, hierarchy layout is a new type of layout for the pivot tables. So as you can see on the right hand side, we have the existing layout which you call as tabular layout. The hierarchy layout is a new addition to this. So hierarchy layout is a new light type of layout for pivot tables where all the row fields are displayed in a single column in a hierarchical fashion. This leaves more room for the numerical data. As you can see, we have the same data in both the tables. And in case of tabular layout, I have product category, subcategory region, all forming separate columns. Whereas the same data in a hierarchy layout is all displayed in a single column. So this gives you a lot more real estate for your numerical data, and you don't need to kind of scroll in a lot of those situations. The other value add is if you have data which is hierarchical in nature. For example, you have product category, subcategory, or you have a region hierarchy, or you have a cost center hierarchy. You may want to show like a parent-child relationship, like a hierarchical navigation. That is again where the hierarchy layout can kind of really come in handy. And hierarchy layout also gives you like more like a drill down experience, right? Where you can look at how the product category doing, and then you can drill down what kind of constitutes the success of for the metrics for the product category, right? Or you can go down to the product level and see which products are doing good, which products are doing bad, and how does it roll up my totals. So with this, let's quickly jump to the actual demo environment, and I can quickly show you how to quickly get started with our pivot tables. So here I have a pivot table already selected. I'm going to add some fields. Let's add a region field. Uh, let's add country, and then let's add state. And now we have like a region hierarchy. Then let me add a value field and something to my columns. So here I have like a hierarchy layout created. This is the default layout experience going forward after the launch. And if you still wanted to kind of use the old layout, you can come to the pivot options and choose tabular layout in that case. For the demo, I'm gonna move back to hierarchy layout. And since you have a single metrics, let's hide the single metrics option. And let's look at each and every option we have for hierarchy layout. So the layout experience, basically, the property sheet for both the layouts is pretty identical, is almost the same, with a few additions. So for example, in case of hierarchy layout, you would see a new header option, which by default shows up as a row, but you can go and rename it if you want. So since we're displaying a region hierarchy, I'm going to call this as region hierarchy, which shows up now. And then let me style my column headers a bit. So let me add like a background color to it. Let me change the alignment. And then if you wanted to kind of not show the value here, you can always go and hide that value as well. That's also an option. And I'm going to increase slightly the height a bit and maybe make it a slightly bigger font. Now it looks good. So after the headers, we can move to the cell section. And this is where we've added a new feature called as column widths. So the default column widths basically help you define a uniform width for all the value columns. So initially you could go in and kind of alter the column widths manually one by one, which is great, but involves more effort, and also it's kind of hard to kind of have all the columns really aligned to the same specific width. So great option now is to use the default column width, where I can quickly go and specify a width setting, and now all my value columns are set to the same width. Let me make it 150, slightly more bigger. And now you can have this setting as well. Now you would also notice that we had the expand to view option earlier, which you moved down here. So what this does is if I use expand to width, I use the entire real estate and expand all my columns to the available viewport. Let me revert it back to the setting. And even though you have defined the default column width, you still have the option to go and override a specific column. So let's say if I just wanted standard class to be slightly more wider than the other columns, I can do that as well. Moving on to the subtotal section. So one thing you can do in subtotals is by default we show subtotals only for the last level. But if you want to display the subtotals on each and every level, you can go and select the all option. And now this will show you subtotals on all the different levels. You can also style your headers, and for this we added another new feature where you can choose what sort of styling you want to add for your headers, cells, all different permutation combinations. So for example, by default, this is styled for both headers and cells, but if I didn't want any styling, I could simply go and disable it. So now it looks like pretty flat and clean. Or I can just do it for my headers and it shows only for my headers. Or the use cases where you just wanted to highlight your cells and could have formatting to kind of just focus on the cells. So you can do that as well. But for my demo, I'm going to do it for headers and cells both, and maybe add like a border setting. So let me add a border. Let me make it slightly blue and also increase the font so make it more larger and prominent. And what you can do also do is you can add like a background color to this as well. So I'm going to add like a slightly darker background, probably. Let me add this one. And to differentiate between the values as well as the header row headers, I can also add a background to my row headers. So let's go and add a row header background. Yes. So that's also done. So this is pretty much the new property sheet, I would say, for the hierarchy layout with some new advancements. There are also a bunch of new settings we've added for navigation and sorting capabilities on the pivot table. And this is common for both the layouts. But one additional feature you'll only find on the hierarchy layout is this combine menu option, where I can have one menu and it shows me all the different navigation options as well as the sorting options for all my row header values. So I can come here and say for my region field, I want to basically sort it by sales, and that too in descending order, right? And you can set a separate one where for country, you want to sort it by country in ascending order, right? So what you notice is like all the countries now are in the ascending order of the text. So that's why you would see, for example, the first country starting with C and the last country is with V. So they're kind of in the ascending order of the text. And if I use this collapse option, you've now noticed that Central has the highest sales, right? And it's in the kind of a descending order. Actually, I need to enable the totals because the sorting is done based on totals, right? So let me go back and say sales and descending order. So now you can see each of those regions are now sorted in the descending order of the sales, right? You also have similar capabilities of navigation from the node as well, where you can go to an individual node and say expand this particular node. Or, for example, what you can do is you can say expand all the fields below that particular node. So central, if I say expand all below, it'll go all the level it'll go down all the way to state value. So that is also there. The same sort of context menu can also be enabled from the column headers. So I can enable that from value as well, and I can perform sorting, or I can kind of do an exclude include kind of operation. So that was the new hierarchy layout for pivot tables. But for our tabular layout or the existing layout, we also did a bunch of new enhancements. So initially, when you have a collapsed column scenario, a collapsed row header field, you could call it, you will notice these blank columns showing up. Now we've added a setting where you can go in and say, hide these collapsed columns. So what this would do is it will only show you columns which are expanded. So now if I go and expand furniture, for example, you'll see a separate column for subcategory. If I do the same, it shows me segment. But if I go and kind of, let's say, collapse this, it'll only show me up to the subcategory level. So this gives you more real estate actually as compared to the earlier tabular layout, which showed up blank columns for it. This is also a default feature. So if you now had to create a brand new pivot table, like for example, in this case, let me just convert to a tabular layout, and you would notice that the hide collapse columns is by default enabled. Another feature which is not launched yet, and that's I was call it like a sneak peek into something we launch very soon, is contextual subtotals. So for this, let me expand my entire pivot table. Oops, I'd collapse it. Yes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and enable my subtotals. So let me go in here, and my subtotals are only enabled. So if you see, when subtotals are enabled, the label by default is subtotals as a default one. Maybe let me add some styling to it, make it more prominent. Yes. Let me make it more darker so it's easily visible. Yes. But oftentimes what happens is, especially in case of paginated reports where you're printing this out, and what could happen is, a scenario where you see a subtotal on a page, but you don't know what segment, subcategory, or category it refers to, what it is linked to, right? And you might have to go back and forth to kind of flip around and see, okay, the subtotal is linked to home office, right? Or in cases where there's high cardinality, what could happen is you have the segment on one page and maybe the subtotals or that value could be ending two pages down the order, right? So there's a lot of back and forth you might have to do on case of paginated reports, or even in case of a dashboard, right? You would have to kind of scroll up and down to figure out what is my subtotals corresponding to. So what we did is we've added a new feature called as contextual row subtotals to add the extra context so that you don't have to go back and forth in case of paginated reports or even a dashboard. So you can come in here and click on the plus sign, and this will basically add the context or basically the group name. So let me expand this a bit, right? So now you know that this subrole is linked to corporate, and this one is home office, right? And this is kind of enabled for all the subrole levels. So if I come down to, for example, let me enable this for all my levels, and you will notice that it's not only for, let's say, my ship mode, I can also see for segments and subcategory. So I can see that contextual subroles on each of those levels. I can also be more creative and say, instead of saying this as subtotals, I want to say, for example, total of and then that particular group name. So it says total of consumer, total of corporate. So you can be more creative in the way you want to display it. So that is pretty much what we did for pivot tables. Moving on to tables. So for tables, what we did is we added a new feature called as data bars. And data bars are nothing but those miniature bar charts which help you quickly scan the table, right? Especially when you have really large tables and you're kind of skimming through it. Data bars really help you kind of drive attention to those values which are really big or really small. So let's now go to the property sheet, and now you will see a new section called as visuals. And if you open the visual level section, you'll see an option called as data bars. And now you can choose the field you want to apply the data bars. So data bar is only applied to the values. And here I have quantity, sales, and profit. So let me just add something to my sales. By default, it shows you the red and green color, where the green is positive, red is negative, but you have the option to kind of change around the colors the way it kind of goes well with your dashboard or the assets you're kind of creating with it. So let me basically change this to blue and make it, let's say, an orange, right? And now you have the data bars already set up as well. And you can do that for the other value fields as well if you want to. So this is more like a handy feature. If you've been using Excel and you wanted something similar, now you can do that in QuickSight as well. And this is, it kind of makes it more visually appealing as well, the tables, so they no more look kind of boring. It kind of adds an additional layer of sizzle, helping you quickly spot those outliers. So this being said, we've come to a close to our end of the webinar, and I'll hand it over back to the presenter. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhupi, for this presentation on table visuals and pivot table visuals. It's exciting to see all these new functionalities that are being made available. Before we wrap up for today, quickly want to remind you of the next event in our learning series, which will be on automating paginated report generation using our new reporting APIs. Sign up for that using our community if you have not already. And some other upcoming events. So this Thursday we'll have a live Q&A with our solutions architects at 12 noon Pacific time. For the European folks, we will have the immersion day next week on Wednesday, August 30th at 10 a.m. Central European time. There are many other events which you can see on the events section of our community. Thank you for your time today. Please take a moment to give us feedback on our sessions, and let's stay connected and learn together. Goodbye.